Okay, I was going to talk a little bit about how I make 3-pound tourbillons. I got some jigs here and I'll go through the process of how I do it, but the point of the jigs is so that my sons can help me build them. They don't know crap about fireworks, and I'm not even sure how interested they really are in it, but this equipment allows somebody with low skill to build them perfect every time. It's kind of like the same concept of in woodworking in my cabinet shop. I build a jig so that I know somebody will build it correctly when I'm not holding their hand. So I'll start with this PVC jig. This is probably one of the key things into making a tourbillon accurately. It's got the lift holes here, and then it's got the spin holes, and they're perfectly perpendicular to each other. You loosen up the clamps and just tighten them up to squeeze them in. I found one where I can slip it in for the video to save me some time. But basically, what will happen first is this jig over here, it will go in. And I got this little piece of wood I inlaid as a mark, and I want that seam to line up with that. And then I adjust this rack to hold this center line perfect. The reason why I don't have a permanent stop in here is because sometimes these tubes are just ever so slightly off from length. As long as I put the tube inside the jig with the even amount from end to end and line the centering thing up, it's going to make it correct. And these things aren't that critical, actually. You can be off quite a bit on these things and they'll still fly fine. The reason why I want them to be as accurate as possible is because I'm putting canisters on top of them, and this top heavy weight and then it being a counterbalance to it, it needs to be as accurate as possible so that it will spin up correctly. As you can see, once when it gets really whipping around, it spins really nice. And it does have I usually put a tack on it. I don't know why this one don't, but it does have a little, like a brad nail with a thing of epoxy that's doing the same thing. You can see the lift holes here, and these are the vent holes that spin it up, so it'll spin in that direction. Now this can be filled with, crackle. I hope my camera's pointed correctly. I can't tell. This will be filled with crackle, stars. It could be a salute. This is the spoolette on top, and it's really just serving as a whistling sound. You can use it to ignite this, but I found it difficult to get that timing just perfect. I do have a spec on that works with the type of fuel I make, but I still don't like it. So what I do is I drill a hole through here with a black match. And by the time the fire gets to that part, it's pretty much at its peak altitude, and it'll pop it just about at the right time. What else on these? Oh, and I'll show you how I accurately drill that jig and center all this up, and it takes where a dum-dum can do it. So now that this jig is in there, I put these toggle clamps down, lock it in place. This sled actually moves this way, even though you can't visually see it. It does move and it is free. You clamp this one down, so it's very stoutly locked in. And I had the specs on where to set the table saw at. It has a block here to set the blade height. You slide it through, and then you turn it around the other way and slide it through again. And that will leave the notch at the perfect amount for this stick to fit in there. It'll be a nice snug fit, and it will be just right. So you loosen this up, take it out. Now the next thing I do is I want to make this saddle. The saddle is for the canister to fit on top here nice. And what I use is a spindle sander. I just change it out to one of these. And I just hold the jig up there and do it that way. And it's actually really easy to do. It takes just seconds to do, and as long as you're not cutting away plastic and just the paper, which is easy to tell, it makes it just right. Then I go ahead and drill the holes while I have it in this jig before I loosen up and take it out. And I believe that's a 3/16 drill bit. So with all these operations done, with it never being removed from this tube, they're all perfectly square, parallel, plumb, all that good stuff. And yes, when I drill it out, I do have a dowel in there so that it doesn't fray it. Now, the next step is, after, now it has the notch in it. You're going to put it in here, and I guess I got the stick over there in that jig. But you'll put the stick in here, and I got it for different length sticks. And the reason why is the more weight you have on here, the heavier it is, the longer your stick helps it fly nicely. So like if you're doing crackle, which is a heavy material, it works nice to use a 22-inch stick. And you can use a long stick with no canister on it, but why add weight to it if you don't need to? So that's why I have 18 inches for the others. And you can even go a little bit shorter than 18, but that's where I'm at on that. So anyway, you line the sticks up with the correct marks on the jig, and then you just clamp it down, and you'll have a dab of epoxy in there. And you could just let it be, push it off to the side and let that set up while you build another tourbillon, whether you're pressing it or doing another step or whatever. You don't have to sit here and baby it and make sure it sets up right. Now this jig here does a couple different things. Here's one that's already notched. It fits in there like that. And here's the saddle. And then the canister will sit on top of it like that. Well, one of the tricks is to drill this hole just right so that it will all be perfectly lined up. And because you use epoxy or like this type of material, it's that flexible CA glue. You don't want that glue to screw up the black match and cause the fire not to transfer. So it's best to put your glue on there, put in the jig. This jig will hold it in the perfect position with this perfectly up. Let that set up, and then you can re-drill the hole back out to clean it up by hand, and then put your black match in, and then you're assured that that match isn't contaminated anyway, but yet at the same time your canister is perfectly in position. And I'll show you a little bit of how this is done. It's easier to show than try to explain it. I got this stick just a hair too long, so that's why it's fitting way too tight. But normally this stick would already be attached to this tube when you get to this stage. And everything is pinned and indexed on my jigs, no matter what I make. So this can be turned either way. It doesn't affect the accuracy at all. It's perfect positioned. It fits in these notches to center it this way, and then these cleats center it this way. And then it fits tight to the tube, so the tube is in perfect position. Then you'll take, I actually have it set up for a different size tube. Let's say we put this one in here. Actually, let's drill the hole first. This is my hole drilling jig. We'll put this one in. We put these little side things in there to hold it that way. And that squares it up, it centers it this way. You can see this is pinned and indexed. This will fit tight to the type of spoolette tubes I use. And that holds it all just so. So now you can go ahead and drill it. Then you'll take it apart. Forgot to lock that down. Take it apart. Then you'll put the real canister you're going to put in there. And I'll show you how I make this hole just right as well. But you can see that these spoolette tubes fit in there really nice. It's a real nice snug fit. Let's assume this is a finished canister. And you're now ready to, you got the black match in, putting it in there. This will hold it in position so that everything can dry. And you could just walk away from it. And again, go do something else. To make that little hole, here's a junk tube I'll show you. And I have these set up for different size tubes and I have different spacers for that jig if I'm using a different size tube, if it's a heavy wall or hand rolled one or machine wound. But what this jig does is that it makes sure that the hole's perfect, centered side to side, and it's a perfect fit for the tube. And all of them are pinned and indexed to this block. You can see this one's got a roll pin in it. Put it in there. Now this is like a cork bore. It's been hand polished with like cartridge rolls like you use for port polishing a engine head for racing. These clamps center it this way. These lock it down. Then you just simply push that forward. Because one day I got careless. It's not pushing the piece out anymore, but it has a little thing in there that used to push it out. Sometimes it gets stuck in there. There it goes. Used to work perfect, and then I screwed it up. But I'm trying to see where I put that deal. I don't see it right now. But that spoolette fits real nice into that hole. I guess that's it I can think of. All these jigs really are kind of overkill for these things. There's no doubt about that. But when we make these, we'll make about 20 of them in a day. And with the three of us going at it, we get it done, and it's done and over with, and I know they're right, and I don't have to be nervous about watching anybody or anything like that. So anyway, I just thought I'd show this, and I'm sure there's other ideas you could do with these. You know, sometimes I'll use a color comp on the ends and then just BP in the center with Faro TI is my favorite. Also, I can't get a glitter to work worth the damn with these things to lift them up or even to spin them up very good. But something that looks similar to a glitter, and it spritzes the same way, is I just use real chunky granular aluminum with just the hottest BP you can make. And I guess it kind of molts it just enough that when it's kicked out and spun out of this thing, they spritz real nice. And I don't put any carbonate in it to slow it down. It's just as hot as I can make it, and it actually looks pretty darn good, and especially for a tourbillon, that is. You could put micro stars in these things. They'll get out the vent hole and work okay. You just got to make really sure that they're not too big. You can make them bigger than a vent hole, but because they will burn to a certain amount inside the tube, so by the time they get to the vent hole, they're the right size to get out. That's kind of the trick to dial them in. And I also will coat them with graphite that helps protect them from the intense heat inside, so they don't get fully consumed inside. But they look good when they get spun out and thrown out. It's a nice little effect. Anyway, I guess that's all. The only other thing I could say that I do is I cut off ends of a wood dowel real thin, and I use that for my plugs on these. And I just glue them in with CA glue. And these tubes are weak enough that if you use BP and a little bit of whistle dusted inside there, and I just jumbo fill with mouse turds, it makes a pretty darn good break. It's better than what you think because it's only about 75 feet up in the air when it goes. So when they're that close, that size actually looks pretty good. That's it.